My name is Chloe Bruce. For several months I've been running a YouTube channel, I think a bit over 4 months, about my diagnosis of schizophrenia, but also talking about my specialist subject, which is Russian energy politics, which I studied at postgraduate level under a scholarship. I've been talking about in my diagnosis of schizophrenia, and in separate styles of video, I've been talking about the symptoms, the triggers, and what it's like to be under section in hospital in the United Kingdom, my home country. In this context, it might be quite a clear vision also of how fascism in the UK works. I don't say it's a fascist regime. We've had a long history of democracy, but nevertheless we've got a lot of erosion over time to our democracy, including the welfare state. I'm now in a council flat, unemployed, but I was homeless for 11 months under UK definitions. And I've been talking about the UK media and the government and certain elements in the government, and in the context of this fascist element, even creeping fascism. Today I've been discussing UK politics, but also in the context of the Ukraine-Russia war, and I've been giving some insights without not actually working as a journalist at the moment still, or I was an energy journalist and business journalist specialising in Russia. I'm a social scientist, a political economist, but not an economist. Although I write about energy matters in the political regimes, in the political context. But I've been talking about the Ukraine-Russia war, and nevertheless giving my thoughts based on my doctoral thesis on Russian natural gas politics. I've been trying in this unpaid channel to offer insights into the current situation, this desperate situation of conflict, but also talking about our own, here in the United Kingdom, our regime hypocrisy. And there's something for everyone. If you're interested in the mental health side, there are some videos about that and how I worked with it, when I've taken time off like now. And then there are some more academic discussions, both of the United Kingdom and of the former Soviet space. Now today I want to respond. I've been talking about Keir Starmer and his pre-budget speech recently. And I've also been talking about the current Tory party leader contest. There's too little news on it in my view, and I've tried to give some insights recently. Today I would like to respond to part of Rachel Reeves, that is the UK Chancellor. Part of her budget speech was given yesterday on Wednesday the 30th. Now I'm only going to discuss here part of it. I'm going to try and aim for 2 or 3 videos on the budget to break it down. But I've also got some commentary on some news that was on Sky today, which you'll see in the news media everywhere, in fact. I'll come to that. So I'll read this shortish discussion. So today I'm doing the first of what I hope are several soon-to-be videos on my YouTube channel about the UK budget speech given Wednesday 30th by Rachel Reeves, Chancellor of the Exchequer. I'm concerned about many aspects of her budget, but here I will discuss her defence speech, then a word on the UK news media and their Russophobia, to show an overall UK trend towards fascism in relation to Slavic nations. And I want to just divert. I'm not convinced when they criticise Russia that it's not actually an attack on all Slavic beings. I think the patriotic English song stated in the title here on this video shows two sides to the United Kingdom that may have a mighty military, but I feel there's a tendency to disdain other nations in a sea of ignorance. In this part of this talk, this 2-part talk, I will describe how today's news that I saw discussed on Sky's news channel, a disdain for Russia that today, as they seem to be calling them stupid, in the context of a Google fine. They fail to see how a maths culture might be different depending upon the country, and also this highlights the need for context in financial reporting. But first, on the budget, dressed in a vampire-esque burgundy collar and dark suit, Reeves said financial support in the form of weapons would continue to Ukraine. She cites 2.26 billion, which are pounds sterling, I presume, which, if I understand correctly, will be used for Ukrainian military, and she says, this amount will come, she says, from money from inactivated or inactive Russian sovereign assets. First, what are these assets in the UK? They're the assets they have, I presume, here in our sovereign nation. What are these assets really worth, and what are they exactly? Is it property, she feels, or is it some kind of service or physical entity? So what are these assets? A bit more clarity would be useful. And are they really worth the amount stated? Second, second and quite problematic, or poses somewhat of a problem, would Ukraine itself want Russian funding for its military when the consequence may be an escalation in its war with Russia as Russia moves militarily to seize back the assets and on Ukrainian territory? There are many ways they could sanction Ukraine in any case. In other words, if Ukrainian military is funded by Russian money and Russia is a neighbour to Ukraine and encroaching upon their territory as we've seen, would they not then seize back the assets that are supposed to exist in Britain in Ukraine in terms of money or buildings or objects, power plants? I can only see it leading to an escalation. Third, this so-called indefinite funding for as long as it takes, she describes. So she rules out then, she says there'll be an indefinite funding year after year, as far as I could understand. But she's saying there'll never be a war between, I don't want a warmonger, but you have to be in a realist position. She's saying there'll never be a war between Britain and Ukraine, but one day they'll, with all the funding we gave them, maybe change regime and attack us. What happens if they get a vile dictator at the head of Ukraine? And so this funding, in many ways, will fund their military in a way that could pose a threat to the United Kingdom. And Ukraine won't necessarily want the money. Fourth, can't she see, as though she is, as though with this relatively small sum of money attempting to get Ukraine to do UK bidding, as far as I can see, support I understand, staunch support, I can understand doing everything we can to help Ukraine, but also to overall stop the war. But Ukraine has problems of its own, such as tackling corruption, a known sticking point in its negotiations and attempt to join NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, I forget this abbreviation. Fifth, further, our own military, could be attacked if it shows any signs of benefiting from Russian financing itself, even if it is allowing Ukraine to be a buffer between us and them, with fighting with all its might to stop the war from spreading westward. So it might be attacked if it shows any sign of significantly benefiting from Russian funding for the psychological reason. If it's military funding, at the end of the day, it entails loss of Russian lives, and they're meant to take that well. This irresponsible way of discussing conflict as though money alone will help is a schadenfreude, joy in others' pain, media menace that has a culture of bullying, and I think many people might feel bullied by some of them. I personally feel bullied not only by their Russophobia and anti-Slav sentiment as such, which I'll come to, but because of their whole attitude toward medicine and mental health. I've said how I had a diagnosis of schizophrenia in my late 20s, in the early new millennium, and in the early 2000s, and I also had a later diagnosis of epilepsy, and the stigma has been appalling, and I'll come to this in this particular example here. I've discussed this in many other YouTube videos. Not only is this a press that agrees with the government that we're SMI, severely mentally ill. I've said in an earlier video that SMI, this sort of text jargon, is meant to be a concrete medical condition of sort of well-defined, is it? Severely mentally ill, I have said, as a Russian speaker from the age of 14, having studied it at GSCE, SMI, severely mentally ill, they join in with the government by calling us SMI the word for the Russian mass media, SME. It's an abbreviation of the Russian mass media and well used in Russia. And I feel, because I'm both mentally ill, diagnosed with schizophrenia, and of Slavic Jewish origin through my mother, myself a Christian, I feel personally offended. I don't think it can be anything else but racist. I've written to the government, I've written to everyone trying to get them to stop this SMR. I've been to doctors, I've been to medical profession, and I can't really see a doctor with that kind of attitude. And this is a press who calls it not paranoid schizophrenia, but paranoid schizophrenia, with a reference to cyanide, giggling. To help with this abbreviation, it might stem from BMI, body mass index. But this is even worse, changing to SMI. BMI becomes SMI in some kind of Holocaust pun on the May to December metaphor used by misogynists of Nazi ilk to say women of colour or Jewish origin get fat, or Slavic women also get fat as they get older. I will say more on the budget elsewhere in subsequent videos, as I've said. But to continue this discussion, I've talked about this endless vitriol against Russia without any concrete examples, and these are in recent videos also, but they're a theme running throughout all, 50, 60 videos I've got since July, since early summer. But now, to add insult to injury, on this morning's news, scoffing Sky journalists, laughing, giggling their heads off at a sort of scoff at a Russian fine, they say, was leveraged against Google. Russia's filing Google, they say. And I just want to point out, I'm not an economist. I only have a B in Maths GCSE. I'm not a mathematician, but nevertheless, I enjoy maths. I try and learn maths, but I like it anyway. But anyway, as far as I can see, they say, and with a conversion to sterling that I daren't quote, that I don't know the source, but they have said, except Sky quotes someone, but I don't know what source they're using, that there's 2 undecillion rubles in the fine for Google by rushing because of far-right online activity. Oh, sorry, rather ultra-nationalist far-right activity, ultra-nationalist online activity. They giggle as they quote the Times UK, echoed with cruel mirth in other medias, that this amount exceeds the world's wealth. And they also said exceeds the number of, makes something of pebbles really, grains of sand in the world. Now, as I said, I only have a B in maths, and that's at GCSE level. Our equivalent is, well, the exams people take in the UK at 15, 14. Yes, I 15, 16, I took them at 15. And then I took my A-levels at 17. But I had to work a lot with numbers when I was a gas journalist and pick it up as best I could. But I took a risk-free approach. As it can be easy to get carried away with this sum or that sum, but at the end of the day, get it wrong. No matter how well and right it looks to you, the galling truth and cold-hearted nature of the business is it's going to be wrong. So I had to take a risk-free approach. Now, I want to say, in contrary to these racist discussions I'm about to describe, this guffawing at Russian stupidity, they call it, as far as I can possibly tell from this mirth and laughter, is Russia is known for its large science community who put us to shame in how well versed they are in mathematics. Now, I have said, and I've been chatting, I don't really have anyone I can talk to at the moment about it. I don't like to bother people as much as I did in journalism, but I'm not working as a journalist now. I don't really feel it's my place to bother city workers. I've been chatting with Copilot and ChatGPT about how upset I am over this racist discussion, seeing if anyone out there could share my viewpoint. If you think about how widespread this media discussion of Russian unrealistic sums, they don't know their own economy or something. This is, as such, I want to point out from this discussion, we were talking about how maths cultures vary and how some countries favour fractions and some tackle inflation in different ways and reevaluate worth if it's a large number or an extremely large number. Here I wish I knew calculus at all. There is a need to understand the context and scale used in this number and whether it expresses a lower number as defined in the context. Whatever way you look at this sum, an urban myth or otherwise, to punish the offender with a preposterously large amount of money or an imagined offender with a preposterously large amount of money requires a conceptual study and this should have been present. It would be useful to know more about ruble fluctuations also. In the early 90s, I recall using 1,000 rubles as a 1,000 ruble note as a lavatory paper, because there was such a shortage of lavatory paper, there was never any in the lavatory when you were out about. And that is because it was worth less than the lavatory paper itself. Rather, it was worth less than the lavatory paper itself. But in any case, I would have done the decent thing and bought more, but I couldn't. There was a shortage of lavatory paper in the early post-communist years. So today, baffled and upset and feeling in some kind of anxiety state, I looked at the Bank of Russia website today and saw a chart, and I looked at the current denominations in ruble, and I saw a chart which I believe was saying that the 5,000 ruble note that is present in Russia, if they have a 5,000 euro note, is about 38%. It says 38% of new notes used in everyday exchanges. It's used in everyday exchanges as opposed to other notes or coins for 38% of these transactions. This is my understanding. I can't be sure, but anyway, I think that's what they were saying on this chart. Abstract figures detail real-world examples, and purchasing power of a currency should be discussed to put the fine amount stated, even though it's an astronomical sum, in a context. It should have, and like I said, scale and context. It should have alerted the journalist in question writing about this that this seemingly unrealistic high sum of money may be A, their interpretation only, B, a typo of some kind, or a failure to consider scale and context. It's easy to toss around numbers without a context. 125 rubles in London for a loaf of it might be equivalent to a loaf of £1, might buy you a £1 loaf, but it may be 70 rubles in Russia. To say the least, a less racist and more nuanced discussion was needed, with firm facts about why it's a nonsense number. I have to explain this sentiment was so unpleasant and ridiculous if you know how much effort they've put into science and educating women in science to such a superlative degree they're running a major energy economy with all the hard work that entails, with the freezing cold Siberia up against them when they have to go out and view these gas reserves in Siberia in -50 temperature, risking their lives, their extraordinary mathematical skills, the fact that we nearly asked them for consultancy advice about how to handle our science education, and all they can say about these mathematicians and these banks and these individuals is laugh. Without any, as I say, without this, the context and scale of the number. I'm not good at maths, but if it is out there, this number, with whatever interpretation, I can only assume that if that's literally this astronomical number in every single direct, literal term, then I can assume it's some kind of bizarre joke or urban myth or a weird threat. Methodology used to arrive at the figure of rubles should be scrutinised and relative values in relation to one another. I may be offered unlimited prompts on a web service, but I have noticed this infinite number doesn't exist, as they seem to define unlimited not as infinite as you might see a closer synonym, but as something like 30. In other words, you learn over time that unlimited is probably restricted, maybe 30, 50 prompts, maybe 100 prompts, or maybe a timescale in which you evaluate how long you can use that service. I'm just saying that I don't have the best maths, but I do know one thing: it is simply unacceptable to call a nation stupid, especially Russia of all people, when they educated me at 14 on a Russian exchange and they were the only school and teachers ever, Russian teachers were the only ones ever to say I had any ability whatsoever. And thanks to them, I moved up from a bottom group in maths, doomed to fail, always failing maths, not physics but maths. I got a B, which is not the greatest. It should be an A, I hope. But this is the only place. You're a musical child, they'd say. What a talented child. And even as an adult, what a talented person you are. And they won't give you the time of day in British schools, private or state. I've been to both. And you of all people say their maths is bad. I do not know the reality of this number because I can't check at this time, I'll try to, if I get more information, I'll say. But of all people, you tell them they don't know their maths. Then they supply you with gas, supply EU with gas, and they don't know their numbers. They don't know volumes, they don't know denominations, they don't know units. And you make a currency exchange based on which exchange rate? On which denomination? Was it the purchasing price? Why couldn't you discuss the purchasing price instead of pulling an astronomical number out to people who may not know rubles? Lots of countries have to talk in thousands, millions of their currency, and they have different approaches to maths, as I've said. Thank you for listening.